What do you think was the largest catalyst for change in how we use the modern meeting room? Was it the mass adoption of laptops, internet speeds, a digitally native workforce, or maybe even the pandemic? Well, for me, it was internet speeds because these delivered both the technology and the cultural shift that allowed us to be able to function as we do today in the modern meeting room. But let me know what you think in the comments. Today we're discussing how meeting room AV has evolved, a potted history if you like, starting in the 1990s when I was first involved in the AV world. We'll discuss what have been the catalysts for change, how have expectations changed, and what happens next. Before we get started, make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. I'm the Meeting Room Doctor. Let's open surgery. Well, let's start with the basics. What do AV systems do in meeting rooms? Well, they provide display and audio facilities to allow presentations to be seen and heard throughout a meeting room. They allow connections from content sources like laptops to the in-room display equipment. They facilitate virtual meetings where all parties are seen and heard. They promote productivity. The systems, they should be intuitive and they should not need technical intervention when in normal use. And also they need to look good as well. These are today's expectations and reasonably easy to achieve in 2025, but this has not always been the case. So how did we get here? Let's look at the decades leading up to today. Prior to the late 90s, meeting rooms were a place of face-to-face meetings, board meetings, training sessions, and perhaps even an overflow work area. I vividly remember our accounts department occupying the boardroom during their end-of-year audits at a company I used to work for in the 1990s. And the room really wasn't missed because the room wasn't really used that often. Senior executives worked in cellular offices, conducting small team meetings there. Open plan working for senior execs had yet to become a thing, so privacy wasn't as important. Businesses had a small number of large meeting rooms. AV in these meeting rooms was practically non-existent. You were more likely to see a telephone conference phone, a flip chart easel, perhaps a whiteboard, and maybe one of those overhead transparency projectors, the ones where you put on a clear acetate sheet and it would project onto the wall. You'd perhaps also remember the TV that came in on a wheeled trolley with a video recorder or DVD player that you used to run training videos on. At best, maybe a projector placed on the table or perhaps ceiling mounted with a screen that would pull down or be put up especially for the meeting. The content itself was served by a permanent PC because really laptops weren't a thing and the aspect ratio was 4:3. So very square format, and it was before widescreen laptops became a thing. And let's be honest, audio was also limited. The wider office at the time had very limited internet. There was an emerging computer networking scene, but this was completely wired as there was no Wi-Fi in commercial premises yet. And personal computing was bulky desktop units. Laptops were still fairly niche. During the 2000s, we had a number of technological developments that changed how meeting rooms were used. Laptops became more widespread, especially with travelling executives. When they attended meetings at customer sites, they often wanted to show off their newfound PowerPoint skills and plugged in their VGA cable into whatever AV systems were there. Later in the decade, digital connections like HDMI became available. Increased internet speeds enabled more reliable video conferencing, but this was still point-to-point, so one system directly talking to another using typically an IP address to access that conversation. The hardware was still really expensive and it often was quite resource heavy with the IT department, so they tended to have to set this up because it wasn't intuitive. Large format displays moved from plasma to LCD, which were lighter and cheaper and larger to a point, but we still had that maximum of around about 55-inch during this time. Meeting rooms were not universally equipped with AV. Many were still private discussion rooms, perhaps with a flip chart or a whiteboard. Those with AV were larger boardroom type spaces, and they had projectors for large rooms with drop-down screens and dedicated video conferencing suites. Telephony integration was still a big thing, and you often saw the telephone handset proudly placed in the middle of the meeting room table. Control and matrix switches started to appear in corporate business, but this was not really in the SME space. It was still quite niche. There was still a large analog presence in meeting rooms: telephones, flip chart easels, whiteboards, screens on wheeled trolleys with DVD players, and often now video conferencing setups were still common. The wider office at the time had started to move open plan. Wi-Fi has started to become more stable and speedy, although most still connected using a cable into the LAN. Smartphones were yet to appear, but BlackBerry ruled the 2000s. The 2010s were a time of innovation and AV adoption in corporate meeting rooms. Staff started to expect good quality presentation and communication facilities. The industry met these demands, but with this came challenges. Signature rooms often went overboard with features. Video conferencing with content sharing, specialist microphones and speaker systems, multiple cabled connections to accommodate current and new technologies. So you had to facilitate for HDMI, VGA, analog audio, display ports. We continued to support new and legacy connections. Wireless presentation became a thing, and typically these were either dongle or software based, but they weren't particularly intuitive at that time. Telephony still ruled, and we had some sites with terrestrial and or satellite TV. And there was often in a room multiple display formats. Projectors were used for large-scale presentations because large format display screens were still too expensive. And then behind that you would have single or dual screen video conferencing. It's because cameras don't like the direct light, and the size of the screen could be slightly smaller. Early ecosystem video conferencing rooms started to appear at the end of the 2010s, but were still mainly large corporate deployments. The players of video conferencing at that time were Cisco, Tandberg, Polycom, Lifesize. Great, but still point-to-point in a lot of cases, and still calling using an IP address. Companies also used AV systems to show off in their meeting spaces. Because they could, if they had the budget, they would be able to control lights and blinds and air conditioning systems. They would be able to drop down screens and projectors, partly out of necessity because you generally had multiple screens in a room. The industry was still evolving, and systems were yet to fully integrate natively. So behind the scenes, there was an array of hardware required to aggregate and route signals, and this was presentation or matrix switches. You had devices that controlled EDID, which is the handshake signal between sources and displays. Signal was still required to be scaled because you were still accommodating for analog and HD sources, and you had to make sure that whatever the source was provided to the system, it was upscaled to look right on the displays in the room. So controlling multiple platforms without a massive remote became part of the AV system control ecosystem. And this was a system that allowed you to be able to talk to the equipment using various control protocols, RS-232, infrared, relay, and then latterly over the LAN. And using bespoke programming, you were able to set up a touchscreen with routines that the AV systems were able to do to turn on multiple items at a time in the room. Most meeting rooms now had AV installed though, but mainly for local presentations. Video conferencing was still the demise of the larger space. As video conferencing became more widely adopted though, calling between platforms became a challenge. Cloud-based aggregators such as BlueJeans and Starleaf became popular to allow different proprietary systems like Starleaf and Polycom to call between one another. An emerging trend at this time was also the divisible room, and this was born out of boardrooms being huge but still underutilized spaces. And pair that with the fact that office space was expensive, construction teams started to install removable walls, allowing large spaces to be divided simply. And this created fun for AV teams because they had the challenge of how to control a system's transition between being open plan and in divided roles. So audio had to be split when the wall was in place and then joined back when the wall was packed together. And whilst this seems easier, there was an array of switching and control that had to happen in the background to facilitate this. In the wider office environment, an open plan office was the norm. And we also started to see a move away from structured ceilings to an exposed look, which created a poor acoustic environment in some cases. There was a lot of glass, mainly to let light into open plan work areas. And the heating and ventilation systems in the ceiling created hard surfaces, hard reverberant surfaces that weren't great for meeting room systems. Users mainly had laptops and sat on Wi-Fi, and the beanbag and free breakfast culture started to make an appearance. So let's look at contemporary meeting rooms. Let's get up to date. Once again, the 2020s was a decade of change. Driven by COVID-19 at the beginning of the decade, software-based video meetings became routine and an accepted part of the office day. On return to the office, businesses needed to provide more smaller video-enabled rooms. Meeting attendees were routinely a mixture of in-person and remote participants, and hybrid working meant that travelling to meetings became less frequent. The desk phone disappeared from many offices in favour of Teams calls, Zoom calls and mobile phones. So what is a typical meeting room today? A wall-mounted large format display. You very rarely see projectors in meeting rooms now, as the cost of these large format displays have dropped dramatically. Ecosystem rooms, so that's Microsoft Teams rooms or Zoom rooms, now dominate the meeting space. And bringing your own device is an essential part to bring in non-ecosystems calls. Content sharing into meetings is now handled by the ecosystem, simplifying the AV estate dramatically. The hardware features AI, which allows camera systems to focus automatically rather than using cumbersome remote controls, and microphones to be able to lock onto speakers and exclude background noise and distractions from the call. AI productivity software is used to transcribe meetings in real time, and that text is then used to create meeting minutes, follow-up actions and decision analysis. There's more of a focus now on room acoustics in meeting rooms to ensure that the acoustic environment is sound so that microphones pick up audio correctly. That's not only just for the human participants, but also for the AI productivity suites to get accurate transcriptions. Usage reports, booking and remote management, and the divisible room have become less popular. People don't really like to move the walls, so they become a less common thing to see. The town hall spaces that started to appear in large businesses are now becoming widespread across all business sizes. And they're used for all hands meetings in a slightly less formal environment. They feature LED or projected video, area-wide audio, and that can either be background music or front-of-house audio with the use of wireless microphones. Camera systems generally have complex tracking within them to be able to lock onto speakers, and multi-camera is becoming widespread in these much larger spaces. The streaming of meetings in these environments is generally via ecosystems, and background music and digital signage is in place for when these rooms aren't being actively used for a presentation. So this brings us up to date. It will be interesting to see where the next decade takes us. Let me know in the comments the features you'd like to see. If you found this video useful, check out our Fundamental series videos where we cover a wide variety of meeting room technologies and what AV professionals consider when specifying equipment. Don't forget, if you have an active project and would like the Meeting Room Doctor team to help you, check out our Meeting Room Doctor Surgery and Meeting Room Doctor On Your Team services on our website. There's a link in the description. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your support. Make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bells so you never miss a video. Let's all agree, every meeting room deserves to be doctor approved. But for now, I've got other patients waiting. Meeting room doctor out.